Midweek Extra. I'm Josh Sexton. I'm joined by Kieran Molyneux, by Mo Stewart and Dan Austin to look back a little bit on Bayer Leverkusen on Tuesday and look ahead to what could be the greatest Saturday night out of all of our lives as Liverpool face Aston Villa just after the 5:30 between Brighton and Manchester City. Not too much foreshadowing there, and we'll get onto that later in the show. Just want to say thank you first and foremost to Green King Sport. If you aren't at Anfield this weekend and you want to find somewhere to watch the match, you can use the Green King app to find a boozer near you. And also, if you use the app while you're in a Green King boozer watching the game, you can get 10% off drinks and food in those pubs as well. So we'll start with Tuesday then, Kia, with the teams, I guess, being the best place to start, because it's been mentioned a little bit on shows, certainly ones that I'd been on beforehand, about possible rotation, but we don't see it. And you know, I think there's been a bit of an idea the manager had a strongest 11 in his head for most of the season now, and possibly the thing that started to happen rather than too much rotation is that's just sort of shifted the lads who he's backing the most now.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that he's got his 11 and he plays them. He knows what he wants. I didn't expect it myself. I see it as get the games won, get qualified, and then you can start messing around with rotation and stuff like that. Obviously, injuries play a part in things, but I mean, I agree with everything the manager's done so far, and rightly so, because he seems to be winning every week.
And Dan, the biggest one, I guess, going into this game, the biggest surprise of the selections was Tsimikas being the left back, sort of being asked to go again. And I guess not necessarily a surprise in terms of the fact that it's, you know, he's probably in better form than Robertson at the moment. I'm sure most people would agree, but more just because he's played in that one at the weekend. But he has been his first choice broadly in Europe this season, besides the Bologna game. And it seems, again, from the evidence of this one, that he just continues to grow, I think, throughout this run of games, but also within the games themselves too.
Yeah, he has been the favoured one in the European competition so far already, hasn't he? And aside from the first few minutes at Milan, which were dreadful, and the 7 shots, I suppose, as well at Milan, but generally in all of those games, he's played really well. And you know, he's obviously had a really big highlight of his Liverpool career so far when he scored the winning penalty in the FA Cup final. But generally he's not played all that consistently. Even last season when they were missing Robertson for a really long time, Joe Gomez played left back and rightfully was praised an awful lot for doing so and doing so really well. But now he's been handed an early opportunity, I suspect, because you know, Robertson throughout the course of last season and then a little bit the start of this has had injury problems, didn't have like a full pre-season and stuff. So he gets there for a few early appearances and impressed in them. And I think what we've seen so far, as much as, yeah, like there is, certainly when everyone's fit, so far there's been like a favoured 11. I think it's also been the case that if you impress, he'll play you. Gakpo, for example, is a really good example of that as well. If you demonstrate that you're doing, you know, really good things as an individual, but are also helping the system to function, then you'll get plenty of minutes. And there are so many games that everyone who's fit and available has already had a fair amount, I would say, so far. So that's testament to, I suppose, the coaching staff being quite open-minded about people. You know, there are other players that towards the end of last season, you know, it completely pivoted a little bit with Gomez. Like a lot of people seemed quite willing for him to leave. Certainly thought that he couldn't play centre half again, and then he came on and played 45 minutes the other day and was tremendous. An awful lot of people would completely write off Curtis Jones, and now he's probably one of people's most favoured players to start matches. You get that with all of the players, bar maybe like the top 4 who've been there for a really long time. That people will judge them based off the last 3 games that they've played, and they're either not good enough and need to be immediately sold and should not start for Liverpool ever again, or actually they're well better than the other 2 that play in their position, and actually the other 2 are useless now and should never play again. The important thing is to have as many of them in reasonable form as possible at the same time, and that means that if you've got, you know, 2 left-sided centre mids, one of whom is playing really well even though he didn't start as the favoured one, fine, and the same at left back and the same up front or whatever it is, and the coaching staff have got the players into a position where there are more than enough players generally playing well, that it's all fine.
Yeah, and are we at a position now, Mo, do you think, where Kostas has started to change general perceptions of him? Because as Dan mentioned, a lot of it is sort of not very nuanced, and there's a lot of recency bias involved in things. But like I think I'm probably at a point now where I'm starting to see is you know, merits as a Liverpool player, probably more than I have throughout any other period in his Liverpool career.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I think he's someone who a lot of his perception has been coloured by things outside of just his play. Like, and I've said this a few times. Like, there are times when he's on the pitch where he doesn't look like he knows what he's supposed to be doing. And I mean, we can make jokes out of it, but I do think that kind of bleeds in the perception of, oh, he's a bit of a comic character. And I think if you think back of fullbacks past who've been a little bit like that, good evening, Mr. Moreno, I think then it can sometimes feel like, oh, well, he's not very good, is he? He doesn't really know what he's doing. But I think, personally, every time he's had a significant run of games in order to get some rhythm, he's looked a very good player. And I think that it's come at a very good time, this current form, because obviously Dan mentioned the fact that Robbo didn't have any pre-season, he's still coming back and struggling. His struggles in this games recently have been more accentuated than they've been in the past, to the point where it might be something opposing managers think, well, we can get at him, we can game plan to get at him. So in those kind of situations, that's where you want to say that, okay, well, we want the stronger guy at the moment in there. And I think about Leverkusen, you have someone like Jeremy Frimpong playing out wide. I think if the way that we've seen Robertson struggle with Noni Madueke and Bukayo Saka in recent games, you could quite easily see him struggling similar with Frimpong. So maybe that's why Costas was played again, because it was just a case of we need that extra security from the guy who's defending really well. And I think another thing we need to mention is his delivery from set pieces. Yeah. He has been fantastic. He's put Trent to shame. He's put everyone else to shame in terms of the consistency of good balls he's putting in from corners and from free kicks. So I think that's something that's getting him in the team as well.
I think it's probably one of the things that's been ignored a little bit in the past as well too, Keo, is that with these two you can almost go horses for courses, because I think Robertson was probably the better all-rounder of the two. I think it's been fair to say that over a sort of longer period of time, and he was definitely the better defender of the two, you'd say, and I think you'd still say that to this day. But as Mo mentions, there are so many merits to Tsimikas' game in terms of his ability to get forward and link up with whoever's on the left wing there, his ability to get crosses into the box as much as what he can do from dead ball situations as well. I think he is now proven how high quality he can be in all those sort of positive areas of his game.
Yeah. Personally, I think he's not as bad as people like to make out. I just think we also need to be a little bit careful of putting 100% of trust in him. That's my personal opinion. I do think there's times where he doesn't look like the best left back on the planet, and especially when you consider the bar Robbo set over the years. But I'm made up to see him playing much better. There is positives to take from his game delivery. You're talking about his performance in the European Cup, which is what matters to me. And we do need it at the minute, because I don't know whether it's just necessarily a pre-season thing with Robbo, or we are just seeing the results of a man who's bombed up and down the left-hand side for 6 years straight, putting absolutely everything in for 96 minutes. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a drop-off at some point coming soon in his career, because the miles he's covered alone is enough to burn anyone out. But Tsimikas has been sound. I don't know where Slot sits with it, whether it's a change of personnel permanently and Robbo's now the backup choice for him, or whether it's just Robbo needs to sit a few games out and Tsimikas has done really well. And as Dan said, if you play well, he'll give you a chance.
Yeah, I guess the other sort of selection quirk, if you want to call it that, Mo, is Konate comes off in the Brighton game at the weekend. He then tweets his own injury update, which I'm into. He reveals his own signing for Liverpool, and then is tweeting his own injury updates before the journalists can get their hands on it. So you probably had some concerns about whether he'd be risked going into this one. He does play, and once again he's just absolutely incredible. One of the sort of key men who you heard coming up throughout the coverage of Leverkusen beforehand was Victor Boniface. It's clear there's so much talent there, and I'm sure you'd have watched loads more of him than I have, but you can see where the threat is from a player like him, and Konate just completely shut him down at every turn. He was unbelievable.
He did, and it was weird because he probably felt like he was going to have to deal with him more than he did, because Boniface was the part of the Leverkusen tactics was he was drawing out wide to the left, and then Grimaldo and Florian Wirtz were flooding into the central area. And if you think about the profiles of those three players, just looking at them next to each other, they all look very different. So you think there's so many different kinds of problems that each of them have to deal with, and he dealt with it all. I called him the French door, because it was just any time that there was any kind of attack building up, he was just there, and it just slammed right into him and then bounced off again. And yeah, he's in a really good moment at the moment. He's another player who you can tell is brimming with confidence. He feels like he can do anything he wants on the football pitch. And I think when you have him, as a player himself, is very, very good. When you have him next to arguably the greatest centre-half in football, it just makes it even harder for any opponent. I mean, I think back to the days when we were winning titles in European Cups and you had Alisson and you had Virgil and you had Joe Gomez, and it was like you could sense that attackers were coming up and just thinking, well, we're not going to get a sniff today. And I feel like we're getting back to that phrase now with those three. I mean, obviously Kelleher's in at the moment, but he's been doing fantastically well as well. I think this was another game that closes a feather in his cap because he was, had nothing to do for most of the game, and then he had three things to do in 4 minutes, and he did them all perfectly. So they're giving each other confidence, I think, in the way that they're able to kind of defend individually and as a unit. And obviously, if you're not conceding very many goals, it means that you're probably going to win most games you're in.
Yeah, Mo mentions Virgil there as well, Dan. And I think it's clear that any of those sort of preconceptions that people had about Virgil maybe being past his peak and a bit of a fading force are well wide of the mark now. But are we looking at between him and Konate on sort of current form the best centre half partnership in the league and then potentially the best centre half partnership in the world by virtue of that at the moment?
I doubt anyone in a significant league has conceded fewer goals so far this season across all competitions, so probably yes. I think they've both been in terrific form ever since 45 minutes into the Ipswich game when they actually were on the pitch together for the first time. Konate in particular, I think has gone up a level quite significantly since last season. It's maybe helped by the fact that Alexander-Arnold is doing less of the centre mid stuff, so you're not kind of doing the job of two so much. But his use of the ball, I think, has improved an awful lot. Like in the past when Matip and Gomez were there, and because of either injury or form or just horses for courses, they would regularly change. I thought he was always significantly the weakest on the ball in terms of progressing Liverpool forward. Matip would bring the ball out really well and then could spray it left and right. He seems to be an awful lot better at that now than what he was previously. And I think if you went through pretty much every game that Liverpool have played so far, he'd be in the top three performers in probably every one. And there's some games where two forwards have scored one or two each, and there's been great assists from centre mids and stuff, but he still stands out. I think the manager said a few weeks ago, he was asked about Gravenberch getting man of the match all the time, and he said, well, I think Konate should get him more.
I don't know if that's just pressure from Konate in those situations, to be honest.
But he's just a really strong character as well. He's really, really laid back, but in a way that allows him to be really sensible and efficient. He's a very sort of a low pressure defender, if that makes sense. Sometimes you have ones who might be really good players, but it feels like they're kind of reactive more than anything. But he sets the tone, and then the centre forward needs to play within the context that he allows them to play in. I thought Boniface did all right. He worked hard. And he got very little support, and he generally kept running. And then it felt like from about 60 on, he just sort of thought, I'm getting fucking nothing out of this. I don't blame him, because it was really, really difficult. But if you've got that solid basis, then it makes life so much easier for everyone else. Liverpool were not very good for 45 minutes at least, maybe an hour the other night. But the fact that not only did you not concede, but no, did you actually look like conceding against a team that passes the ball quite nicely, just releases the pressure on everyone, because last season they would have probably conceded in that first half. Now it's, even if we don't play that well going forward for 90 minutes, we'll probably still be level and then could try and win the game later on.
Yeah, and that sort of centre of defence, Keo, is still an area you'd like to see some recruitment in the not too distant future, I think. But if you look at the current two specifically, if you're thinking about how Liverpool continue to improve the squad, can they improve on the first 11? You're looking at those two centre halves and basically going, no.
You can't improve on that. We've just said there, there's 3 goals we conceded all season. I don't think anyone else is operating on that level defensively. So you're not going to replace one of them two anytime soon. It's the problem you've got to find, and quality who can come in and be second choice to them. Kwanzaa, we know is going to be a fantastic player, but it's the left side really, isn't it? It's the cover for Virgil once he signs his deal. But yeah,
good.
I mean, we don't want a situation on hands where we've got to find 2 left centre halves in the same summer. But I mean, I'm not the man for that. I mean, I don't know who the second best left side, the centre half is in Europe, and whether they play second fiddle to Van Dijk if they do. But I do think it's an area we need an extra body, but it's not the only position.
I think it's Joe Gomez you're after there, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually probably the hardest position to buy for in the whole of the team, because as Kieran mentioned there, it's not just about the fact that we've got the two best centre halves in the world, but I think we've probably got two of the best backups as well. I think you could say, even a conservative estimate, Konsa and Joe Gomez start for like 16 of the other teams in the league. I mean, maybe Angie's a little bit more keen on Romero than I am, but I would say that their quality is very high as well. So if you're looking to bring someone in, there's someone who's going to necessarily be fine with them. So you want someone who's got the quality, but then anyone with that quality, first of all, you're going to be paying lots of money for them. Second of all, they're going to want to play games. So I feel like it might need to be someone either very young with the ability to learn under Konate and Van Dijk and then become the guy, or someone who also plays left back. And I think that might be the diddle there. You need a left back / left centre half.
Again, Joe Gomez.
Yeah, if
We
there's
already have the man you're all talking about.
if there's a 20-year-old Joe Gomez out there, I don't know if he's got any younger cousins or what, then yeah, snap him up now.
I'll come back to you on this, Kieran, as we sort of move into midfield, because the manager goes with Jones over Szoboszlai in that number 10 position, again, if you want to call it that, based on whatever you sort of think the formation was from the other night. And it seems like he's vindicated, because I just think that midfield looked better than it did first half against Brighton, and I don't know if it could look much worse than it did first half against Brighton, and the manager himself has sort of alluded to that as well. But Jones's contributions in that first half, I just thought contributed to a better balance against Leverkusen, and then second half he's just absolutely crucial in everything Liverpool do going forward.
He's been awesome for the past few weeks, hasn't he? Everyone's raved about Ryan Gravenberch all season as our best midfielder, and rightly so, by the way. But the past couple of weeks, I mean, Curtis has put a big shout in for being our best midfielder. And the best thing about him is I'm fully confident that he can play in all three of them midfield positions. I think the manager talked about it recently. Yeah. But if Gravenberch can't play, I'd feel fine with him playing that role. We've seen him do the McAllister job. But when he goes further forward as well, the passes that he can put through to strikers, he's absolutely flying. And for me, he starts. I mean, I absolutely love Szoboszlai and I love the other two. McAllister's one of the best midfielders I've seen in a long time at Liverpool. And, you know, again, I've just said how good Gravenberch is. But I think you've got to find a place for Curtis Jones in this team at the minute. Yeah,
and that's the thing, isn't it, Dan? Because there's been question marks around Szoboszlai's form anyway, and you know, if you're looking at Jones as sort of the first choice now for the weekend, then maybe the only other sort of place you can look at in midfield as any sort of rotation to get Szoboszlai in is that McAllister position, just because McAllister does maybe look a bit leggy. But you know, if you thought at the start of the season that, you know, Jones would be in that number 10 position over Szoboszlai, I think it would be it would feel a little bit far fetched, just because of how much Jones has been in and out the team over the years and how consistent, you know, Szoboszlai was in the first part of last season. You were hoping he could go again with that, but I feel like Jones has just capitalised on the fact that there are those question marks around him at the moment.
Obviously, the assist the other night was excellent.
Yeah.
You know, the angle that he plays the pass at is really, really impressive. The way that he took the goal against Chelsea, really lovely, and not something that you'd see from him necessarily all the time, or Liverpool midfielders generally over like the last few years, certainly. But the off the ball stuff, I think, is the most impressive. He looks like the most important one in the press quite a lot of the time. When he's playing deeper, he's shutting down passing lanes. People can't play through. I think he just looks like he really understands what the manager wants from the shape, in a really, really good way. And I would hope that he gets a game for England in the next break. Not that like I'm bothered personally, but I think that would be like a really nice kind of marker for him in the progression of his career. And it's also Carsley's last camp with them, isn't it, as well? And he's obviously been you know, a significant influence for that under-21s team in the Euros last year. So I think if he just gets on for even like 45, I don't know who they're playing, but if he gets on for 45 and gets to show what he's about, I think that would be a really good, like, not that he needs it, but a nice little confidence thing then going into a really busy period with Liverpool.
And is it as simple, Mo, as him just sort of winning the confidence battle with Tom at the moment? Because every time I watch Szoboszlai, it looks like he's sort of scared to try things in the final third, and then suddenly you've got a footballer there who maybe just feels like he didn't have the sort of place to lose in the first place, Jones, so he is just taking more of those risks. But it just seems to me like that's the biggest difference in the game of the two of them at the moment.
Yeah, perhaps. I think for me, Dom sort of looks like when he's in position to on the ball to do attacking things, it feels like he's thinking too much. And the thing about Curtis is that he's got the confidence of knowing he's playing well, so he's playing free. And I think that's where most midfielders in particular are at their best, when they're not weighed down by all of the permutations. They just see the game in front of them and give it what it demands. So I would probably be looking to maybe rest McAllister rather than Szoboszlai for this game. I just think when you look at the midfield, Aston Villa are most likely to put her in there. I think obviously Onana's going to start. I think Morgan Rogers is going to start. Those are two very powerful, very great running midfielders. I think we're going to need some kind of strength of running power to put up against them. So obviously of the four main midfielders, Max the one with the least of that. I also think that he's going to get ragged for Argentina again.
Yeah.
And I just think that he never really fully had the time to heal from his groin problem that he had at the last break. So it's probably just he needs a little bit of help. The interesting thing for me though, I think we saw how good Jones was in the attacking midfield position against Leverkusen. I wonder whether maybe there's room for them to swap. So you have Dom playing a little bit deeper and Jones up top. Maybe not all game, but maybe in moments in game they can kind of do it in the way that Diaz and Gakpo were able to do it a little bit.
Alternator.
Yeah. Just give the opponent something a little bit different, but also for Szoboszlai, allow him to concentrate on being the person who presses well, who blocks passing lanes, who uses his energy in his industry, and not have to think so much about the artistry at the other end. Whereas Jones, who's very much in that mode, he can go and do that kind of stuff freely. I mean, it might be a case of where they just see how they feel within the flow of the game, but I wonder if that's something the manager's wondering about.
You can see it's on Szoboszlai's mind though, can't you?
100%,
I mean, he's talked about it in a couple of press conferences. He knows he needs to add more goals and stuff like that. So it is a freedom thing with Jones. Everyone's giving him praise. He's obviously just had the baby. He's on a real high at the minute. Yeah. You can see that in his game, and I agree with you. I think Szoboszlai's got a lot on his mind at the minute, and when sometimes the ball will drop on the edge of the D, you can see him stutter. We'll do a strike it, and if it goes over the bar, everyone's going to moan at me. Yeah. That's going through his head at the minute, so maybe it's a fair shout to drop him in a little bit deeper and use him as an engine, as opposed to using him for goals and assists against Villa.
I'll stick with you on this, Keo, as well, because Mo mentions Diaz there, who sort of feels like the man of the moment from this game, doesn't he? Because that selection through the middle up top just feels like absolutely inspired once again by the manager. Like the front three just looks much more fluid first half, which I think again was an improvement on Brighton, where everyone sort of looked a bit static and like we weren't able to get anything into them. It felt more fluid first half, and then second half is when the real magic starts for Lucho.
It's been coming, hasn't it? It's been coming a bit like a few goals, 3 or 4 goals in a game for Diaz. I mean, I'll hold my hands up. Last year I was one of the people who were not questioning whether Diaz should be here, but questioning, is the more output required? Do the numbers stack up in big games and big competitions? He's answered it big time. I've got absolutely no complaints this year at all. He's been probably one of our best forwards. I've said this not just about Diaz though. I've said this about Salah and Gakpo. I don't mind seeing any of them through the middle, and I think it would cause teams problems. But Diaz the other night was just absolutely fantastic, wasn't it? And Liverpool for 60 minutes. I don't think Leverkusen as bad as some people making out. I think they moved the ball well, as you said. They were compact, they were hard to get through. This is a European Cup tie as well, so once we've gone 60 minutes, we've sussed this team out, and then we can just go and hurt them like that, because we've got players like Diaz.
Yeah, Dan, the first goal is such a thing of beauty from both him and Jones, as you referenced before. And the others, even though they're tap-ins, like the no-look finish on the second one, just shows like how much we're watching a player operating with just supreme confidence at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think he scored 9 in all competitions so far, and his best for Liverpool in any season before this is 13 last year. So he's going to outstrip that by quite a distance unless something really unfortunate happens. He's significantly improved, looked really rejuvenated in terms of energy right from kick-off at Ipswich, I thought. But also, maybe tactically it helps. He just looks so much more of a threat. Felt like in the last few seasons he was a lot more reluctant to run a defender. Now really, really happy to do it. And all 3 of the forwards are nearer to the goal than what they were. It's important to not denigrate last season. Last season was brilliant, and they were mainly brilliant in terms of the way they played for all of it. But they were brilliant by having the wide forwards further away from the goal, and they were meant to be more creative than they were finishing stuff off. When Liverpool were at the very, very best under Klopp, I would argue they played much tighter and were kind of corner of the box type players. You see that an awful lot more now. So I don't think it's a coincidence that, just the goals that the three of them that started on Tuesday, they've all got loads already, and have all been so threatening. And it felt like he just went with, how can I get all three of them on the pitch? Because they all do the shape really well. They're doing the pressing well, but also they're scoring loads of goals. So it'd be nice if we had them all at once. And they're all just working so well together. But the change, especially to come back from the, really heavy injury that he had, obviously like personal issues and stuff last year. Don't know whether the break after the Copa America or maybe being away with like another team just kind of gave him a bit of rejuvenation. But he really does seem reborn, and the level of output is not what we've seen from him before. Even in the first 6 months of his Liverpool career, which up to this point was probably his most impressive run, it wasn't on this level. So I just think he looks by far in the best form at the time that he's been here.
Yeah, Mo, it's such a turnaround from where, I can admit myself, Keo's half signed an apology form there. I think I'm definitely going to have to sign one for the way I spoke about him on shows over the summer, because it's such a turnaround from that point to the point where I'm now going Anthony Gordon, who?
I think a lot of people were just swayed by the idea of Everton being angry.
Yeah,
and I mean,
still am.
And obviously I get that. I mean, I totally feel it, but I think, I don't know how much attention he pays to any of that stuff. I'm not sure how much English he still understands. But if he had heard the whispers, the rumours of everyone talking about Anthony Gordon, everyone talking about him being the guy who's the most saleable asset amongst the forward line, well, he probably took it personally. And he came in to show us exactly what he's made of. And I love that. I love when a player's got that kind of fire in his belly. And I feel like what Dan was saying before about how they're able to do the off-the-ball stuff and still contribute with goals means that I would like to see them continue, because obviously there's the argument that, well, Núñez didn't play very much in the last game, so maybe he's the fresher one to start. But again, I think when you're coming up against a team like Aston Villa, is going to be Unai Emery is going to throw something tactically at them that they've not seen before. Keeping hold of the ball, I think, is going to be a really important part of this game. And also, I just think that Núñez at the moment thrives when there's more space, and that normally happens towards the end of a game. So I'd be tempted to go with the same three again, and then have him as maybe just a grenade to throw into the game on 65.
What also maybe helps with Diaz is that his dad's gone more than 5 minutes without saying how much he loves Barcelona. So if he could keep that form up as well, that'd be nice.
Yeah, he's had a quiet word, just like, "Dad, shut up, man."
Both in a rich vein of form in that sense as well. Mo, I'll come back to you on this, because Dan and Keo both sort of reference Gakpo, and obviously he's the other one who gets the goal in this game. Again, he's just another player who I think looks so full of confidence, to the point now where genuinely whenever he's got the ball around the box, I don't know if I'm doing the whole Joe Gomez shoot thing yet, but I'm thinking that every time he does shoot, it's going to go in.
Well, I mean, I think that we're not shouting shoot at him, but there's a voice in his head to say, let's shoot, let's do it. And that was something I know that some people were down on him about, the fact that when he played as a centre forward, he wasn't shooting enough. He wasn't doing the striking bit of the centre forward role. And now he doesn't have to do the centre forward role. It feels like Slot's come in and said to him, "You're wide left. Don't worry about centre forward. Don't worry about attacking midfield. Don't worry about all these other things. You're wide left. Go out there, make that right back's life hell, and then when you get the opportunity, cut inside and you bang in the top corner." And maybe it's just the streamlining of his job that's helped, but he's absolutely taken that and ran with it. And again, I think that he's another one where you can see the confidence brimming through him. And it could be maybe he was a little bit confused by all of the kind of Swiss Army knifeness of the previous couple of years. And now he's just enjoying the fact that his game is just this. And he knows he can do that very well, because that's what he was doing when he came onto our radar at PSV and proved that he was a good enough player to come and play for Liverpool. So maybe there's a kind of a calmness, a confidence about him to say, okay, I know how to do this, and I can go out there and prove it.
Yeah, and we'll look ahead to Saturday a bit more, but staying on the topic of Gakpo and Diaz in particular, Keo, because you're sort of looking at this now and imagining that's the way the manager, probably will and should go again at the weekend, given, as I mentioned, how fluid that front three look, given, as Mo says, Núñez's impact off the bench. It feels like the sort of common sense thing to go with the three of them up top again.
Yeah, I'd agree. You can't score 4 goals in the Champions League and look so fluid. We said the word a few times. Fluid going forward. I'd stick with that and agree with what Mo says. If for any reason we need a goal later on when the game's more open, you can add Núñez into that fire. But I'm confident if them 3 start, that we'll score goals before we get to 60, 70 minutes and have to pray to Núñez to get one.
And that's the thing, Dan, isn't it? Like, it feels like because it was a sort of Tuesday night into a Saturday night, I don't know what it's done, like sort of warp time a bit for me, but it just feels like there's almost more recovery time in that sense than some of the things we've been used to when it's been like Wednesday, Saturdays and stuff like that. Like, it feels like you're not sort of looking at it and being like, oh, we have to rotate for this level of freshness, so we need Núñez to be able to do this. You can basically just look at it and objectively go, we've got the 3 lads there who are scoring all the goals, keep playing them.
This is like as long a break as you possibly get, really, isn't it? Should have gone to Marbella for one with the training. I would like to pick the 3 of them, and they're just the most fun to watch. Yeah. So I would like to watch them play football again.
Absolutely. You mentioned it before, Mo, a little bit, and that like I am coming towards the idea that like there's probably an argument to rest McAllister now, and I think like you've mentioned about the sort of physicality of Villa as well. I'm particularly intrigued by your Szoboszlai-Jones shout, because I think that's not something that I've thought of necessarily doing. I don't think like when we talked about this over summer quite a lot, I don't think I liked the idea particularly of Szoboszlai deeper. He did a bit of it in pre-season though, and I think like it's always hard to think what you can take away from pre-season, but you were obviously out there and saw more of what the sort of manager was working on in training, working on in those games in particular. Maybe that is something that we could see on Saturday.
I think so. I mean, if you think about the good parts of his game at the moment, in terms of, again, I mentioned pressing, cutting passing lanes out, basically harassing the opponents, you could quite easily see him do that 15 yards deeper and still be effective. In fact, maybe even more effective. And I think the other thing as well is that teams in recent weeks have done a really good job of trying to stop our centre-halves getting the ball to Gravenberch. They've basically just stood as many players as they can really afford to in between Van Dijk and Gravenberch and said, right, see if you can find him now. So having Szoboszlai out there and allows him to maybe be the option, and maybe he can get on the ball a little bit more. And that's the thing. Maybe when he's up front, whenever he's on the ball, he feels like, okay, now it's got to be a key pass. It's got to be something that leads to a shot immediately. Whereas when he's on the ball a little bit deeper, he can take his time. He can be a bit more measured. He can find another teammate and just be part of the build-up rather than necessarily having to be the sharp end of it.
Yeah, and Dan, like you're probably looking at the McAllister side of that. You probably are looking at it thinking that he's probably the leggiest of the options that Liverpool have in that midfield. He's the one who's lacking for sort of sharpness the most. And Mo referenced it before as well. Like, given his importance for Argentina, like I'm fully expecting him to go away with Emo this international break and just get absolutely flogged again. So there's almost you wonder whether there's almost a preemptive change the manager can make here to negate for some of that.
Do we know if they got important games?
I was about to ask that. Where are they flying to?
Paraguay at home and Peru away.
But like in terms of is this a qualifying group for someone?
Yeah, the World Cup qualifiers.
Okay. I mean, about 7 out of 10 countries qualify from there, so it'd be nice if they could take that into account and not pick him. But they probably will. Yeah, I don't think he looks fit particularly. I think in the early part of the season so far, there's been a couple of players that I've thought that about at different points. I think he's still doing all right. It's not like he's playing poorly or anything, but I don't think he looks fit. So I would, maybe consider giving him the rest. Hope that he doesn't play 90 minutes twice when he goes away, but you can't control it. Maybe you can ask him to have a word and that's about it. But the thing you can control is what he does here. And he could still come on at some point and play a significant role. So it's not like you're telling him, oh, you're not contributing at all. But yeah, if a player's not looking fit, I would maybe think about resting him.
The top of the table, by the way. By 3 points. 3 points clear at the top of the table. So maybe if they win the first game.
Paraguay are crap. They could play us 3 in midfield.
Would absolutely watch that. Keo, like, are you having any of this McAllister rest? Are you having Mo's, Szoboszlai and Jones movement?
I understand it. I don't know whether I'm more inclined to see whether he does get flogged before we rest him. But I do agree with Dan. He's not looked his usual self over the past couple of weeks, whether it's a fitness thing or whether it's just he hasn't had the usual brilliant games that he has. I don't know, but I am more inclined to rest players when they get back and see how fit they actually are or knackered they are when they get back from international break. But I do know that McAllister does suffer from this. I remember last season at Wolves in the first half, and he was just dripping with sweat, and after about 20 minutes he was done. So yeah, you are going to have to manage his game time a little bit. It's whether that he's got the cojones to do something drastic. Well, it's not really drastic, putting Szoboszlai and Jones in there at the same time, but it's a little bit different. Me, I'm not so sure. I'll probably still stick with the McAllister and go with Jones or Szoboszlai.
And we'll move on to left back then, Mo, because it will no doubt be a big topic of conversation. And we've already done a couple of the Villa the 2019-20 season parallels on the last couple of shows. Do you think we see Robertson again for this, or do you think you just ask Tsimikas to go again for one last time for the international break?
Well, I think in terms of fitness, I don't think there'd be any issues around Tsimikas if you did want him to play. I think the problem with Villa is that they've got probably one of the deepest squads in the league, so there are so many different options, and it's a very different thing if you're playing with John McGinn as your right winger compared to Leon Bailey. And if it is Leon Bailey, then I think he'd probably want to have Tsimikas, but if it's John McGinn, then obviously Robbo knows him very well. I think that that's something that he can manage, and you wonder how much that plays into the manager's thinking. But I also think that Robertson, one thing we've seen over the course of his career is that he's another player who thrives when maybe he's been written off a little bit, or maybe he's required a bit of a kick up the arse for whatever reason. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does start and he has a very good game.
Yeah, I think the thing that's been a little bit unspoken about Keogh, I'll come back to you on this, on the Robertson thing, is like this lack of pre-season. Dan referenced it before. He had injury issues last season. He comes back from the Euros with Scotland injured as well. It feels like one after the other. He's just had a bit of a string of bad luck, really. And I wonder whether what we've seen in the last few weeks is actually just sort of careful management from the gaffer around that, in terms of giving him a bit of rest here and there. And to be honest, like when he came on against Leverkusen tonight, I thought he looked sharp, certainly sharper than he has for much of this season.
I think that's exactly what it is. I don't think the manager's sitting here now like, oh, we are in the pub going, Robbo's finished. I don't think that's what's happening. I think he's just managing his game time. You can see that he has been pushed a little bit too far. His fitness levels aren't quite there, and it's going to be a long season where he's probably going to be required. I'd probably go with Tsimikas for one more until the international break, and then really have a look at Robbo and see whether we can get him up to full speed to hit the next phase of the season.
Dan, you doing Robertson or Tsimikas?
I'm not convinced that Robertson is that fit. So I suppose based on my own logic, probably Tsimikas. Scotland have got important games. Can't remember who, but they've won like 1 in 15 or something. I think the manager might be a bit on the rocks if they don't win one of the next two. So maybe that's a bit of a wait for him to get fitness and form back, and then he comes back and is maybe able to contribute a bit more.
Yeah, they got Croatia at home on Friday and then Poland away on Monday.
Oh, they're two big games.
Tough. Guessing we're not expecting much else in terms of changes elsewhere, then it feels like the manager does have his best 11 locked down for now, at least until after this international break. Dan, I just want to sort of give a nod to this Brighton and City 5:30, like even before the show. Then me and you've been discussing our plans for watching it. It just feels like it's too tantalising, isn't it, for Saturday before an international break?
There's sometimes when we have like a big game of a night or whatever, people will say like, oh, it should be a 4-pint minimum or whatever to go on the cop for it, and it should be 4-pint minimum for the 5:30, and then you've got to have more.
Price of admission.
What's the 12:30? Is the 12:30 worth going out for? Because you could just make a really big time.
What's the Friday night game?
I tell you what, atmosphere was terrible for that 8 o'clock. No one could speak. That's fine. No, it should be really good. They always bring like a good away end as well. They'll be loud, and they've really got to try and turn it around as well, because as well as they've been doing generally so far this season, I think they haven't won in 4 now. Is it? Lost to Crystal Palace?
Yeah, 3 in a row lost.
Yeah, and are really hamstrung themselves last night by picking the ball up in their own penalty area. So if they could carry on with that kind of form, that would be nice. But it should be a really good game. Tactically, he is so good. None of what they do is especially complicated, but it's still really hard to play against. The two in midfield have had a great start to the season. I think I don't actually, or in the past, haven't thought very much of Yuri Tielemans really, but he's having a really good season. Onana looks great, and people maybe question the amount of money that they spent for him, but I think it already looks like it was well worth it. Rodgers is maybe the most important player in the system already, considering he was playing for Middlesbrough 9 months ago, or whatever it was. So as much as they've tailed off a little bit lately, I think they're a really tough opponent. And if this is another one just before the break that Liverpool can get through by hook or by crook with 3 points, then I think that's a really big challenge to everyone else, saying, well, whatever you throw at us here, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, Mo, it just happens to be your birthday weekend as well. 21 years of age this weekend. It does just feel like we're potentially setting up for the biggest Saturday night of not necessarily all of our lives, but definitely your life. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, the sad thing is it's literally more than double that. But yeah, I just looked.
Don't give that away, though.
Thankfully, there isn't at 12:30 because I'm not sure I could have managed that. But yeah, it's potentially set up to be fantastic. I think we've had such a good run. And this period between the last break and this one, as great as we played up to that point, there was a lot of trepidation. There was a lot of people deep down thinking, well, okay, well, now we're going to be tested. And maybe this has been a bit of we were gone too early in terms of how good this team are. And we've got to the end of it and we're one game away from, what was it, 6 wins and 1 draw, which would be incredible. So, yeah, it really would put the final point on it. And the fact that we might have that game to increase our lead at the top of the Premier League table and then go off into the night, maybe 5 points clear of everybody. Oof.
When and against who do Arsenal play?
Chelsea on Sunday in the half
yes. Exactly.
Still out for that.
Oh no, I'm definitely out for that.
Back out for that.
No work on Monday.
Yeah. But just before, I know the other one, they're booking all these things. Don't put on anything on Monday morning.
We'll speak about that. Don't worry. Yeah, Keo, are you feeling optimistic about? I mean, in terms of an opponent for City to play, the lads who we played twice last week gives us a pretty good idea of how good we think they are. Are you feeling optimistic going into this Saturday night?
Yeah, and I reckon we're doing Man City's fans' heads in and Arsenal's fans' heads in right now with how much we're winning and how seamless it's been. And I know from being on the other side of the coin, there's absolutely nothing worse than City just winning every week from the start of the season. City have got problems. They're not coping well with Rodri being out. They were all over the place the other night. This has got potential for a big Saturday night where Brighton get something and Liverpool have a chance to not just put themselves another couple of points clear and go and have a big night out on Saturday night, but to really put themselves in the minds of the opposition, of Man City and Arsenal, and start to turn the screw and be like, this is Liverpool's year. There's nothing we can do to stop these, because we're not far away from getting to that point where we can say to other teams, you're not going to stop us.
Salivating it.
I was reading before, Matt O'Reilly and more importantly João Pedro probably back for Brighton.
Ooh.
Which feels big.
Yeah.
João Pedro's good.
Very into that.
Love all that. Going round off with predictions then. What are you saying for the Reds game on Saturday 8 PM then, Dan?
They'll win. No score, just they'll win.
Got to score to win.
Couple of goals?
Plenty. Enough to win, I'll say that.
Plenty. Mo, plenty goals?
Yes. I want to say I don't think it will be as tight and tense as last Saturday, but I mean, I feel like it probably will be. Aston Villa, as Dan said, are a very good team, and they've got such depth that you never know when they're beaten. That said, we're scoring goals. We're doing well defensively. I think we'll win. I think we'll win by more than 1 goal.
Love it, Keo.
I don't think Aston Villa are ready for it. I think it's going to be 2 or 3-0.
Love it. Keo's not a shit house. I'm not either. I'll go along with Keo's prediction, of course. Nice one to Green King Sport for sponsoring us throughout these shows this season. Nice one to all the lads for being on the show today. Ash for being on vibes behind the cameras here as well. Up the Reds. What a Saturday night it could be.